Ghostrunner. Fast, precise, relentless. This action-packed first-person parkour puzzle platforming slasher is not your typical first-person action game. The gameplay demands absolute perfection, where a single mistake means starting over. It's like trying to solve a puzzle while skydiving, and boy is it addictive. But what makes this game worth playing, and is it still the case today? Well, we're going to see exactly what it is that keeps this ghost running. First off, the story. Unlike the visuals and the music, the overall story vibe is pretty minimal. It doesn't go too in-depth here, and there's not a whole lot of explanation, but it's fine. The story beats are mostly delivered in the form of voiceovers from a handful of characters during missions, so it's hard to miss, but you can easily ignore it if it's not your thing. I think most games on tighter budgets probably wouldn't even bother, and it's honestly not even all that necessary. But seeing that there is a cohesive story here, it is definitely appreciated. Like, the story is also pretty predictable, with you playing Jack, the Ghostrunner that is somehow special, and it's up to you to save the day.
Is it true?
Obviously. It's tropey and cliche in how it builds everything up, but it does a good job. Especially when you consider the story is probably the least interesting part of this whole package. The world of Ghostrunner feels like your typical futuristic dystopian cyberpunk world. The mega corporations have all but taken over, with their monolithic megastructures the only livable area. And because you live within their towers, you need to follow their rules. And even though the whole thing feels very cliche, it's honestly super cool. The whole vibe and atmosphere is actually captured so well, with very clear inspirations drawn from futuristic cyberpunk themes and Japanese culture mixed in with religious Buddhist references like Dharma Tower and Amida Station. There's also very obvious pop culture Easter eggs scattered throughout, like Kaneda's iconic bike from Akira, or this random tag of gremlins. Like, you know, a lot of thought was definitely put into the world, and whether they're little gimmicky additions or meaningful assets that expand the world further, it's all really cool. Now, onto the visuals. The graphics in this game are simply outstanding. Even though one might argue there's a lot of noise visually, it all looks spectacular and fitting. The lighting is clearly well done, and the textures are super impressive. Like, just from moving around in this world, you can tell they've put in a lot of work. The detail and the polish is just immensely impressive, especially considering the game runs flawlessly without any hitching or stuttering at all, at least for me. Which is actually perfect, because the speed of the gameplay absolutely demands it, especially when you die and need to reload, because it's instantaneous. Like, technically the game just performs really well and is graphically so good to look at, yet it still manages to highlight usable surfaces without breaking immersion. And considering this isn't some huge AAA budget studio, it's actually even more impressive, because the graphics can definitely hold up to that bar. In fact, I would even say it's better than some new releases, but I guess that's not uncommon nowadays. When it comes to the art style, I was thoroughly sold. It obviously fits into that tropey futuristic cyberpunk world, but I mean, it just works. The neon lit walls plastered with digital signage pays homage to old school cyberpunk movies and techie sci-fi worlds. Each stage is also visually very different, with a variety of metallic surfaces or concrete walls. There's this industrial feel throughout, with huge factory fans or bright burning lasers. Cranes also hang from above, and endless cables snake their way through each level. The game just commits to that vision, and the variety stops it from looking boring or overdone. And the cyber void is another cool setting within the game as well. It has this real Matrix-ish or computer hacker vibe, which fits perfectly into the story. It's also visually quite different from the normal world, which not only helps to break up the gameplay and story, but helps to keep the player engaged. And though it's only a small thing, the whole Tetris style upgrades is a super cool idea, both visually and gameplay wise.
Who was that?
It's your counterpart. Get after it.
Now, the music. It is really cool. Unfortunately, I'm not able to use the music here, but it's really engaging and fun and so very fitting. Like, it actually captures that exciting electronic cyberpunk theme in just about every track and every level. It naturally boasts a quick tempo that matches the speed of the gameplay and has a lot of nuance. It just does a really good job capturing the vibe of the world and the intensity of the gameplay. And even though it's pretty consistently on repeat, I never once got bored of it. Like, it's not really something I'd necessarily be adding to my playlist even, but it just sounds really good as a bit of background music. I genuinely encourage people to check out this soundtrack because it's actually just so consistently good. When it comes to the sound design and voice work, they're also both really well done. The bulk of the story is delivered through voice lines, and though you can pay as little or as much attention to it as you like, it's definitely not grating or out of place.
Just Keymaster's goons, pushing everyone around and shouting orders.
You didn't obey.
Some of us didn't.
And though there aren't too many unique voices, I actually think the acting is really well executed.
This is your domain, but I do all the work.
I told you, I can't work from your side.
Each character has a distinct sound and tone, and they all deliver their lines exceptionally. To be fair, there's not really a whole lot of emotional moments, so it's not like you'll hear the voice actors really being tested. But what is here has been done well.
The Ghostrunner? Jack? You're awake!
Yes.
How? We've been rebuilding you for months. We tried everything we could to wake you up, but you never would.
The sound design is also fitting, and I think the devs have really managed to capture everything that's needed and nothing that's not. I will criticize the intro cutscene though. Something about the whole clip just felt a bit off. Like there wasn't enough background noise or ambient sound or something, but it's really just nitpicking at this point. Now, the gameplay. Ghostrunner is not easy. I wouldn't say it's super hard, but it's definitely not a walk in the park. What's interesting to me though is that it feels like the game knows what you're capable of, and it finds a way to bring that out of you. Like, the design of the game is actually very simple in essence, but interesting in practice. And the devs definitely respect the player. You see, each section is a puzzle, and it's really up to the player to figure out what the solution is. The game explains how you play the game by teaching you the controls and mechanics, but it mostly leaves it at that. And the player is given a playground where they have to utilize that knowledge to tackle each section. And I really love this aspect because it trusts that the player is smart enough to find a solution on their own. By the mid-game, there's no real hand-holding, and though initially it can be frustrating, the game trusts that you can figure it out. And to me, it can be super engaging, especially for younger audiences because it's essentially creative problem solving. And as you come to understand the different mechanics and abilities and how to deal with a variety of enemies or new obstacles, each section is unique enough to feel different every time. Like, some sections don't even have enemies and can still be very challenging because it expects you to link together everything you've learned to get through it, which makes for an annoyingly addictive gameplay loop. Now, having said that, there are still issues that I had with it. The difficulty in general is pretty manageable, honestly. The controls at times though can be a bit frustrating. Dashing, for example, seems to most commonly default to going forward even when you're trying to dash sideways. The last mission was the best example of where this was an issue. Throughout the game, I thought I was actually misclicking, but during the last mission, it became obvious that it just didn't always work. The default key bindings are also somewhat cumbersome, but a lot more understandable. Like, crouch or slide is bound to control, and pause or dash is bound to shift. And as a first-person shooter, these controls absolutely make sense. They're pretty much the default everywhere. But this game isn't a shooter, and when you don't have enemies and aren't really using the mouse a whole lot, it feels clunky. Like this train section, for example. All you need to do is dash side to side or slide under, and yet it just feels off because you're only using one hand essentially for the entire section, and your right hand can't really do much to help. It obviously isn't game breaking, but it just feels bad. Now, moving on, there are a heap of things the game does right. The entire concept is just super cool and badass, and both the visuals and music complements that super well. The load times upon death are ridiculously fast, and it really embodies that run, die, repeat trope. The varying abilities are all super cool and it can make for some really interesting runs, and the surprisingly large enemy variety can really mix things up a lot because each one gives you a different challenge. Like, there's some areas that are filled with enemies and others that are pure traversal, yet it's all still so engaging. There's emphasis on verticality and movement, but it's not the only thing at your disposal, and you're constantly given new upgrades or tools. And the whole gameplay loop feels like it's made for speedrunners. Like, I managed to finish the game, but I'm sure each section could have been done a lot smoother and quicker than I managed. There's also a couple extra modes. This kill mode, for example, is like a time trial that rewards you with additional time for each kill or orb collected. Or this wave mode where you get a new upgrade each time you complete one round. And again, I just love this whole Tetris style upgrade system. It's like an inventory management piece that forces you to really consider what is most important for that particular portion of the game. There's actually just a lot here considering this is meant to be a 7 to 8 hour long game. Now, with everything said, it's time to answer the real question, whether this game is worth playing today. In my opinion, if you want a deep story or only care about lore or prefer a slower, more deliberate approach to narrative, then this might not be your cup of tea. But if you like speed and precision and being in that flow state where a single mistake can end your run, this is probably the game for you. The difficulty will definitely put some people off and annoy many, but if you have the patience to work each level out and fight through the frustration, the game feels both rewarding and addicting. Between the thrilling music, the gorgeous visuals and the compelling gameplay, Ghostrunner is definitely a game worth playing today.
Catastrophic core failure imminent.
If you've managed to sit through this whole video, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to let me know what else you'd like to see in the comments. Hopefully, I'll catch you in the next one.